Welcome to the UIAAA Connection podcast. Hometown Ticketing is proud to be the exclusive sponsor of the UIAAA Connection podcast and to provide schools nationwide with the best options for digital ticketing for their events. Visit their website at hometownticketing.com to learn how they can make digital ticketing possible and simple at your school. Thank you to Hometown Ticketing for their exclusive sponsorship of the UIAAA Connection podcast.
Welcome back to another edition of the UIAAA Connection. I'm your host, Mark Hutch Hunter. Today we have something for episode 2 of season 7 that we've never had before. We've got 3 guests at the same time. I am thrilled to have the authors of the book, Leadership with Legacy in Education-Based Athletics, Rich Barton, CMAA, Carol Dozibrin, CMAA, and Mike Ellson, CMAA. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you, Hutch.
Okay.
Yeah, thanks. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having us.
And I certainly appreciate you. I'll share with the audience. They may get a kick out of this, or they may think I'm old, but I woke up this morning after having dreamed that I had these 3 on my podcast. So I just texted them and said, can we do this? And they've made it in their schedule to make it. So I'm excited about that. I've just got some questions about how the book came about, all these types of things. Normally on the podcast, since you've all been on, Rich, you were on episode 8, Carol, you were on episode 19, and Mike on episode 51. I get some background and all that type of stuff. Well, I'm not going to ask you all that again since you've already answered it once. I really want to know about the book and what a great resource this is going to be for everyone across the nation. And it will show up. I like it. There it is. There's the book right there.
Show the back cover.
Oh yeah, show the back cover. There you go. There it is.
Yeah.
So I've got the 3 best-selling authors on the podcast. I'm expecting that this may go through the roof with the amount of hits that we get. The first question is going to be, where did the idea for the book come from? Mike, I'm going to throw that out to you and then let Carol and Rich fill in. So first question to you, Mike.
Sure, Mark. Well, I'd say it originated, first of all, with the 3 of us and our collaboration with the development of partnering with parents, which is LTC 716. And we collaborated for a couple of years during COVID and became really good friends. And it was all basically online. Carol being in New Hampshire, Rich in Utah, and me in Tennessee. And so through that collaboration, we just grew a great friendship. And when we had the summit in September of 21, you and Jake Von Shear did a session on podcast.
Yes,
and
I remember.
Talking to the individuals about, how easy it was to do a podcast. And you had written a book before, the Plateau book, and, Jake had written a book. So watching you all and how you led those sessions, knowing that you tried something that very few ADs had attempted before, we were just inspired to, hey, let's try this. And so we wanted to continue to grow our friendship. I was leaving Indianapolis and Rich was headed to the airport. I was driving back to Tennessee, and I called Rich and we started discussing the idea. Both of us had this dream, and then we both pretty much simultaneously said, let's call Carol and see what she thinks as well. So from my perspective, that's where the idea of the book was born.
That's fascinating. Carol, what do you have to add to that?
I am just so blessed and so pleased that I have this friendship with both Mike and Rich, whom I respect greatly, and working with them on 716, when that ended, because that course was going to be launched, there was kind of a void. So when they both reached out and said, what do you think? I was like, really? You want to write a book? But yeah, it was just so exciting. And not the fact that it was so much about, the book itself, but this collaboration with Rich and Mike, that we could keep our thoughts going, and that we could reach out and put something together that we would hope to have a great impact on people across the nation.
Very good. Big Rich, how do you remember it? I'm thinking back to September of 2021, and I know all the Utah guys travel together, but that may have been the year I got you a little bit earlier flight so you could get back to Richfield before midnight. So what's your recollection on how this all happened?
Yeah, I remember it just like it was yesterday because Mike called me. I was getting ready to board my plane out of Indianapolis, and he, like myself and Carol, we didn't want that collaboration to end with the completion of 716 partnering with parents. Through the pandemic, through those 2 years of development of that course, we averaged at least one Zoom every other week, at least, sometimes more frequently than that. And we all knew each other before that process, but we had a deepened friendship and appreciation for one another. And these two are the best in the business, and collaborating with them has been a great blessing. And we felt like we came up with an inspired give back to the profession with 716, and we felt like we could give something more. The only thing is, right now we need to come up with something else to collaborate so that we still get to Zoom and spend time with one another.
Let me ask you a follow-up. Mike, you mentioned this now, and you talked about those that follow the program know that when you say I wrote a book, the difference is mine is a novel, mine is fiction. And so I made this stuff up. I made the whole thing up. And if there's mistakes in it, nobody knows, because nobody knows if it's real or if it's fiction. You guys, on the other hand, you come up with this. I mean, this is a book. Obviously, I've read it in the first 2 weeks it came out, and it's being read all across the nation. I expect that it's going to be a mainstay on many professional library shelves. And will you talk about, I'm just fascinated by the three of you. You came up with the idea we're going to write a book, because I know how tough it is to write a book, because it took me a long time. And so I just congratulate you, and am fascinated that you decided to go that route, because I know how tough it is. So thanks to all of you. Let me ask you this. We'll go to Carol first on this. How'd you decide on the format? Obviously, it's after September now. We're doing another Zoom. One of you said, let's do this format, or you kicked it around. How does that happen?
Well, we were used to being on Zoom with each other because, we had spent quite a number of months on 716. So we knew that, a Zoom format for us to be able to collaborate was going to be doable. And we started on a Google Doc, and we came up, we had just thrown out a bunch of ideas of what we would want for what we at the time called chapter titles that turned into lessons. And looking at what we felt was really important, what we felt was really necessary for a book dealing with leadership and legacy. What were those most important topics that needed to be addressed? So we put together 15 different topics, and worked on those titles, those lessons, and just spent time on the Google Doc putting in some information as it came to us, whether it was some quotes or whether it was just some narrative that we felt was really important to that particular topic. And we were meeting mostly once a week, but then we started meeting sometimes 2 and 3 times a week as we really got into it. So we spent just over a year. It was probably about 11 and a half, probably about 13 probably about 13 months from start to finish. But I'll tell you, it was more the time that we spent on Zoom that was more valuable than the time that we actually were on the Google Doc inputting information.
Well, I can't imagine the amount of give and take that went with the Google Doc. Let me stay on that topic. Rich, we'll go to you. You had the 15 topics, lessons, chapters, however you want to discuss them. Was it split up evenly 5 apiece, or were equally invested in all 15? How does that come about?
Well, we all independently jotted down things we thought could be lesson titles.
Mm-hmm.
And it was interesting how we all shared a lot of the same thinking as to what we had, and then we came together and narrowed it down. There were even some lesson titles that we more or less combined to, but we came up with 15 that we felt good about. We also split up 5 apiece to where we each devoted some additional individual time to some of those, and as we had people preview our book and things, one of the messages was it's easy to hear some of our individual voices in some of those lesson chapters too, but it was a collaborative effort. There's pieces of all of us in those 15 lesson / chapters, and we decided early on that it wasn't just going to be about us and our stories and experiences. We were partial to trying to have real experiences and stories, because I know for me, when I read a book, I can appreciate narrative and quotes and different things, but the thing that lasts and stays with me are the personal examples and personal stories. And so that's why we set out also to get some personal stories related to the 15 chapters from some of the best throughout the country. And that was a great thought to do, because there are some amazing examples and stories put together, yours included, as you are the closer in the last chapter.
I'm not sure how that happens, but we'll leave that till the end of the discussion. I'm very humbled by that. Let me finish up this topic with you, Mike. They talked about everyone put in, and then you kind of split the 5 amongst yourselves. When I read the book, I remember reading the story about how you made an effect on, you were coaching, lost the game, and it was against someone else, and how that came back later and came full circle. But it goes back to what all 3 of you said, and Rich particularly said, when I read the book, because I hear your voices, and I'm thinking, oh, that is so Carol. I mean, I can hear Carol's voice when I'm reading the story, when she's telling the story, or yeah, that's just like Mike, or that's just like Big Rich. So just comment on that before we go to the next topic.
Well, I would say, Rich used this word earlier. There was no question this was an inspired project, and the collaboration between Carol, Rich, and I was rich. It was, so easy. The dialogue was smooth throughout. I kept thinking about the quote, "It's amazing what can be accomplished when nobody cares who gets the credit." And a lot of times individuals, will read a book, or there might be a co-author, but very rarely do you see 3 authors. And never at any time from September of 21 through Thanksgiving of 22 did I ever sense any kind of individualism out of Carol or Rich. And, even for you, Hutch, you've been a longtime mentor, and the mentorship that occurred with just the way Carol and Rich lived their lives was such a blessing. And the 15 chapters are, the titles are things that we're all striving to be better at. And that was part of the collaboration as we walk through this. The listening perspective, needing a mentor, being real with the stories that were shared by the three of us, as well as for the individuals and professionals from around the country. So the collaboration was just phenomenal. And again, thinking through, we have 3 different parts of the country that are represented. We have over 100 years of combined experience when you put the 3 of us together. But the through line, the common thread, all 15 of those chapters can touch the life of a brand new athletic administrator, a veteran, or anyone, across the country, if not around the world.
That's incredible. Thank you. I just had a little interruption here from my granddaughter, and so we'll get her out of the room and get back to you. The next question was going to be, how did you decide on the topics for the chapters? I think we pretty well covered that. Mm-hmm. And so let's go, who came up with the title? So Big Rich, I'll give you the first crack at that. I mean, that's leader, but it's not just leadership with legacy. It's leadership with legacy in education-based athletics, which means it's specific to high school. And so talk about how that came about with the 3 of you.
Well, I think we all liked the topic of leadership, and what's more important than having leadership of legacy that includes influence, and all of those titles for the different chapters go along with leadership with legacy. And so I think from the beginning we all 3 felt good about that. The book itself makes a reader self-assess their own leadership journey as it relates to legacy. With all of those chapters, each of us have had our own self-assessment, and that's one thing we hope that each reader looks at as their own individual self-assessment. And I think anybody who reads the book, it's going to help them to be more motivated and inspired towards a legacy of leadership and whatever their stewardship is. And it's not just a book for athletic directors. It's not just a book for coaches, but anybody that's a school leader, a teacher. There's parts in every chapter, every lesson for anybody who has a leadership stewardship in any realm.
Mike, let me go with you to the follow-up. Was that always the title? Did you narrow it down to 3? Was it narrowed down to 4? Was it we voted on the 2, or it just kind of happened as we put the things together?
I think all the words were always there: leadership, legacy. We wanted to make sure we were focused on education. We want the value of athletics being seen by school boards, superintendents, principals, coaches, community leaders. And so all of those words were always there. And pretty early on, we were able to line up leadership with legacy and education-based athletics. So that was a great foundation for us throughout the time we wrote the book.
And so, Carol, it's a great title. I love the title. Once you got the title, and then was it easy to get those 15 topics to melt together, to fit in there? Was there a reasoning behind, for example, the front porch, culture, and relationships are the first 3 in the book? Was there a different order at one time once the title became cemented, or was this always the order, or how does that work?
We did have, a variety of chapter titles that we had, as Rich had said, we came up with what our chapter titles could be. And, oftentimes we're all on the same page, but we did, look at how we wanted this to play out. So the front porch did end up as chapter 1 right away. And, talking about culture and relationships and how would things follow? What would the flow be best? So we did work, we did spend some time working to order them, as we came up with all 15. But but starting with front porch culture and relationships, I would say that was, pretty much the foundation for the book. So
Excellent. Let's get into a question, since this is new to me, since I've never had 3 on the show at the same time. I want, maybe Carol, you can start with this, and I know the answer from my end, but self-publishing is not something that's easy, and self-publishing, there's a little bit to it. So maybe you can talk, because I think you made most of the connections talking to the other two, about when you got it published on Amazon, and then of course you got some help with some distribution at the recent conference from Hometown. But maybe you can talk a little bit to that for those out there that may one day want to write a book and realize that it's a daunting task, but it's certainly not as tough as getting an agent and trying to get some big New York house to publish your book, because I went through that for a year. So Carol, take over.
Well, we did, and we had spoken, Mike and I had spoken with you in July about what your road was to get your book published. So we knew, what it was like going with Amazon. But that was in July, and at that point we weren't near ready to go the publishing route. So
Right.
We did look at some other avenues, and realized that we had our own deadline, and going some of these other avenues, we weren't going to probably hit that deadline. So we ended up going with Amazon, and putting everything together, making sure that you follow all the rules that are set
Exactly.
out. But it's just a matter of having everything ready, print ready, and uploading it, and double checking and triple checking, and checking 10 more times just to make sure, because once you say this proof is ready to go, it's going to be ready to go however it looks. So because we did want to have some books ready for the conference, we did go also, once we uploaded everything and we were published on Amazon, we did go with another company to print some books for us, because we knew that we couldn't get that many books printed in time on Amazon. So we did go with another company, 48-hour books, in order to get the books printed in 48 hours. So
there you go.
But again, it was one of those things where, okay, we now have everything in a PDF. Is this exactly the way we want it? And then, go over the proofs again. And, it's really scary looking at everything and then finally hitting okay.
No,
Because once you hit okay, it is what it is.
I know exactly what you mean. I loaded my book onto Amazon, and I would bet if you compare Rich's version of my book, because he read it early on, to maybe the copy Mike has, you won't. There's maybe 5 or 6 corrections that I've made, but I went over that. Over that. And still there was a mistake here, a mistake there that I had to fix later. So that's incredible.
I'll just add, Hutch.
Yeah.
We had one of our colleagues in the profession Zoom with us, and he's published. But he was amazed to find out what Carol had done through the final end of our process. Her talents were immense as far as the final work in getting it published ready. with all of the formatting, with the covers. In fact, our colleague friend said she could have saved him thousands of dollars that he paid somebody else to do, but her talents were utilized. And I'll add, everybody talks about getting a publisher and things. There's some advantages to self-publishing. A publisher likes to oftentimes control the content, and there was an education professional that was good enough to look at our book, and he owns a publishing company, and we could have gone that route at their timeline and with some of their controls, and we felt much better about going our own route, telling the stories as we fully desired to. And and one of the comments that was made by him was, well, there's three of you. You're not going to make any money. And we made it quite clear this was not endeavor to make money. This was solely a give back to the profession that's provided us with so much. And so, and the other thing was, well, you need to do this to get speaking gigs and things like that. That's not why we did this. But we are extremely satisfied and fulfilled with what we put together.
Sure. Has anybody approached you? I know when my book came out, and like I say, it's sold hundreds, it hasn't sold thousands. There's been a few people ask me about when the book on tape version is coming out, and I said, well, you can help me with that. If you can get me 10,000 books sold and I get some money in the bank, then I can afford to have books on tape. But let's finish up then. Mike, anything else to add about the editing, the publishing that may be of interest to people out there?
Well, I would just say, seek advice from others. We ask a lot of questions. And yes, Mark, we did talk to you in Seattle in July. Rich mentioned reaching out to a publisher. We talked to friends. We leaned heavily on people to give us honest feedback as we were walking through this process.
Yeah, that's incredible. The thought just occurred to me that even though I introduced you all alphabetically at the first, that I maybe should have done a better job. So even though we're halfway through the podcast, our listeners need to understand, and I think most of them probably do, but we have as our guests 3 executive directors. Rich Barton, as most people know, is the assistant executive director at the NIAAA, formerly a president in the UIAAA. Carol is the executive director for the New Hampshire athletic directors, and Mike is the executive director for the Tennessee athletic directors. And so when you put it in terms of that, I'm just kind of feeling like, well, I got the big hitters on today. And so let's go back. I'm trying to think, because probably it's Rich's turn next to speak first. I want you to talk for a moment about the contributors to your book, because by my count, there's 40. And that's not 40 countrywide. There are some that's 40 contributors worldwide. And so maybe speak to that, and then we'll go to Mike and go to Carol.
Well, and we didn't set out to have that many, but I think as we got some stories in, we started to see the value of it and wanted to include more. We actually wish we could have included many more, because there's so many more great people out there to share. And of course, it's hard to ask that of anybody in the AD profession with the busyness of life. But we asked for specifics in a lot of cases, with stories related to those 15 lesson chapters. And then in some cases, as some of the months went by, we asked for just personal stories that we could choose to plug in where they best fit. And some of those stories actually would have fit in a couple of different chapters. And so the 3 of us had to discuss where to put it. But stories that are very inspiring. We've even seen situations where some of those have already been added to IAA magazine and
Right.
such. There are
Exactly.
some tremendous stories that were inspiring for us to read, and anybody who reads the book is going to be greatly inspired by them, and feel like it's a good mix of narrative with story, and so many people will read those stories and they will see those faces of those great leaders as they read those stories.
Mike, anything to add?
I would just say, if someone's going to write a book, make sure you have fun. And one of the things that we enjoyed is when we would receive back an email with a story to add to the book, we immediately shared it with each other. And to be able to share in that and to be thrilled with the depth with which people have shared their stories, examples, that to me is the part of the true essence of the book.
Carol, any other thoughts before we continue?
Sure. We really wanted to make sure that we had all areas of the country covered. And then we reached out internationally. Sometimes what happens in one area of the country, obviously happens in another area of the country, and the names and the faces are changed, but so people can relate to those stories. So it was intentional on our part to make sure that, we were covering north, south, east, and west, and beyond the borders of the US, where, we cover the country, East Coast. And when Rich was in Utah, he was the West, and Mike was covering the Central. So we thought the three of us had things pretty well broken up in thirds of the country, but we just wanted more voices to be heard. And we're just so thrilled that we had so many people accept our invitation to be a part of this legacy. Because it's not our legacy, it's a legacy of a number of people who really collaborated on this project.
Sure, that's some great insight. Thank you all for sharing. I'm interested. This question was not on the talking points that I sent you, but I'm hearing you talk about this in the process you go through. I can compare it and I can't compare it, but like I said before, because mine is a novel, it's a work of fiction. This is a hands-on professional look. I'm interested in if the topics brought certain people's names, or if you thought of a name. For example, let's talk about Pete Shambo, who Rich mentioned earlier, who was in the IA magazine. Like when I think about Pete now, obviously I think about his walk along the Appalachian Trail, but that story is incredible when you think about spending almost 6 months of your life right after you retired. So I guess my question is, did the names inspire the topics to you, or did the topics then inspire names, or was it a little bit of both? Mike, I'll give you the first crack at this.
I'd say it was a little bit of both. Again, just for us, for the three of us, reaching out to friends that we had felt like we had good, healthy relationships with, to hear their stories. And then once they returned their stories, okay, which chapter or which lesson is this going to fit in? That was our primary focus. We wanted them to freely share their hearts, share realistic stories from their community, experiences that they had seen student athletes have, coaches, again, community leaders. The historical part of this. Sometimes you have to go back to the past to understand the future. So taking historical perspectives and putting them into this book so that future leaders can learn from things that have happened. There's Scott Nordy's story comes to mind.
Right.
The tragedy piece, or Roy Turner's ABCs of leadership. And there's so many more that we could list, but to see how that resonates with us. And then I think Rich or Carol said it earlier, a lot of these stories we could have placed in several different lessons throughout the book. So that was really enjoyable to feel like we had that flexibility and freedom with their stories to place them where they needed to go.
Carol, your thoughts on how this came about with the stories and the people?
You know, they were given free rein to share a story that was related to a topic. So, you know, if someone had a story that they wanted to share about the front porch, like I think it was Jason Parker's story about the front porch.
Right.
You know, so I mean, obviously that was a no-brainer that went in that chapter. But you know, like Pete's story with Joy in the Journey was just so apropos. But you know, there were some people who said, I'm not really sure where this best fits, but you know, so they did leave it up to us. But there were a lot of people who had some specific stories that were just on target for some of our lessons, and others, you know, could fill in where we needed them to best fit.
Wrap up this topic for us, Big Rich.
Well, you know, falling back to the word inspiration, I think as we put together some names and we said, well, I'll contact her about this topic, and I'll contact him about this topic. I think there was some inspired thoughts related to some of those people, and then with some that we didn't even give it a chapter topic to. It fit in perfectly somewhere where it was needed, and you know, we had the joy of seeing how so many of these stories just came together with a perfect fit to our lesson chapters, and that was a really neat thing, real special thing.
That's fascinating. Let me, before we go on to the next, as having one that was asked to contribute, it was very, I mean, we've all been asked to do a lot of things, write articles, etc., in our journey as athletic administrators. But I'm here to tell you, I just didn't sit down and 30 minutes later, this thing came out. I put some thought into that, and I put there a lot of thought and preparation and prayer into that, because that's my thought was, this is going into a real book. This isn't going into a novel. That people are going to read this, and so this has got to be something that's good. So speaking from someone who had the honor to be one of the contributors, I just wanted to thank you, because it was a great experience for me. And when I honestly was flabbergasted when I read the book, and as Big Rich said, I was the cleanup hitter at the end. That's, you know, that was beyond. I just never thought of. I look at those 40 people on there, and I can think of 35 off the top of my head that I would much rather have the last say. But I just wanted to thank you all, because it was a great experience for me, and thank you for the growth experience that it gave me. So let's go on. I want to talk. We'll wrap this up fairly quickly, but I want to talk about the first 3 lessons I'm going to give. I was going to try to get all 15 lessons in and talk about each one. We don't have that time. But Rich, let's go to you. Just give me thoughts. The first 3 lessons are the front porch, culture, and relationships. When you think about those first 3 lessons, what's the first thing that comes to your mind?
Well, especially as athletic administrators and coaches, we are the guardians of the front porch. And, you know, said it many times in speaking to groups and things, your school, your community can be known for a lot of great things, but it can be that one negative thing that comes from an athletic program. Now it's reflected on your entire community. And that's something that not a lot of people understand, the weight of that responsibility that an athletic administrator or coach has, being the guardian of the front porch. It's huge, as all 3 of you know, and our listeners know. And so, what greater place to start the book than talking about the front porch? And there's a natural extension into culture and relationships, because all of those are at the heart of the front porch. And so there's some great narrative, some applicable quotes, and some great stories that you'll find in those lead-in chapters that I think also do a pretty good job of hooking the reader for the great things that lie ahead in the book.
Excellent. Carol, let me go to you next. We'll go to lessons 4 through 6. The inner circle. I love this next one. You're always on an interview, and I really love the next one. Listeners learn and learners listen. The first thing that comes to your mind when you hear those 3 lessons, having been through this process.
Sometimes in this profession, you feel like you're on an island because you're the only one in your school, and sometimes in your school district who does the job of athletic administrator. So it's really important to, have that inner circle of people who can be honest with you, who you can be honest with, who are your confidants. You can share what's going on and seek advice. And you are always on an interview. You're out at games, you are visible all the time. And there are people who are always checking to see where you are, what you're doing, who you're talking to, and they're always asking questions because they want to know, community members, parents, they're invested in their child and what their child is doing. So they want to make sure that the person who's leading that program is someone who is worthy to lead that program. And there's a lot to be said about listening, and really listening to understand people. Parents want to be heard. Community members want to be heard, and really taking the time to hear people, hear their concerns, hear that things are going well. Those are all things that are really important. So, you have to be a good listener, whether you're an athletic administrator, a principal, a coach, a superintendent, a teacher. You have to be a good listener. And, sometimes people don't have good listening skills. They hear what people are saying, but they don't understand and comprehend what people are saying. And it's really important to to really take that time and have no distractions, and go through some really good listening skills.
Very important. Thanks for your thoughts. Mike, I'm going to turn to you for lessons 7 through 9. Visionary leadership, which when I think of you, that's what I think. Authenticity and grit and growth mindset. What comes to your mind when I pull those 3 out to you?
Well, the first thing I'll say, and I think all 3 of us or all 4 of us on here would say this, all these chapter titles or lesson titles are great. Lesson takeaways at the end of each lesson are great. But by no way or no means do we think we've got it all figured out. That was one of the things that I enjoyed the most in these last several months, is just being reminded of, I've got to keep growing. I've got to keep learning. And the book really helped me help pull that out. And we hope it does for others. But the story I'll focus on, those are all great chapter titles 7 through 9. But in number 8, lesson 8 on authenticity and grit, being real, having great work ethic, battling through being tough. We as athletic administrators have to be tough, or leaders for that matter. And I was thinking about how real Daryl Nance's story was when we were in Denver in 21. And I don't know, all 4 of us might have been in the room when he told the story to the leadership training state coordinators at the Tuesday morning meeting of the conference about how we may look good on one side, but, we may be scarred on the other. And he took that tree and he turned it, and just thought, that story was so real, and it creates a great word picture for the reader to be reminded that, hey, we don't have all the answers. We're not perfect, but if we're reading, if we have a growth mindset, we've got a chance to bust through, we've got a chance to work through. And so for those chapters, that was my biggest takeaway. And then, let's dream and go chase it, and never think that we've got all the answers. It's kind of, what's next? What can we do next to serve and help other people?
Perfect. Thanks for sharing that. I wanted to mention these other lessons. We won't have time to delve into them. 10, perspective. 11, role models and mentors. 12, expect the unexpected. We could spend a podcast just on that one. 13, servant leadership, which I think of you three when I think of that. I love this one. They don't know what they don't know. Rich and I have had numerous discussions over that over the years before he moved to Indianapolis. But let me get a final comment from each of you on the last one. I guess I'm partial to that because that's what I wrote about, but it's not only my interpretation or my vision of what joy in the journey is. There was at least 2 or 3 others in there, one we already mentioned. So Carol, I'll give you first crack about joy in the journey, because I just think it's so important when it's all said and done. You really, if you're not happy, then your journey is going to take you nowhere. So I'll let you comment first.
The job of an athletic administrator or any kind of school leader is not an easy one. We all know that. And, but, there has to be a love for what you do. And I think that's where the joy in the journey comes. That, I've had people say to me, your job is crazy. Like, you work 1 million hours a week and you're dealing with, people who don't always like what you make for decisions, and, buses aren't on time, or, and they come up with all these variety of scenarios. And I said, but I love what I do. And I really think that that's what it comes from. The job is something that, you have to love with your heart and soul. And, it comes from the heart, and it's really, it's not about you. It's about all the people that you serve, particularly the student athletes. They're the ones that you're there for. You're there to watch them grow and learn and become the future leaders of our communities and our country. So, that's what the joy in the journey always has been for me. And I still have, a journey as executive director, although I don't have a direct impact on student athletes. There is still that part of the journey that I can contribute to. And I'm just so happy that that I've been able to collaborate with Mike and Rich. We all had our strengths. I think in every page of this book, our strength, each of us has a strength somewhere. And that's been the best part about this.
Rich, for you, joy in the journey.
Well, I mentioned one of the best parts was collaborating with Carol and Mike, and one of the other best parts was, Hutch, I have this, call it a bad habit or good habit of waking up early in the morning, and on those mornings of going to school about an hour and a half early, I would devote a little bit of time each morning to this project. And as I did, and my mind would get consumed with personal experiences and examples from my journey of the path. And it was a great blessing to reflect on so many experiences, some through adversity and challenge, but to have that reflection opportunity brought a lot of joy to me. And with the book, that's just a fitting finishing chapter to close out with, because we all need to seek joy in our individual journeys, no matter what occupation we're in, or what stewardship. And we're all blessed, the four of us and our colleagues, to have a great organization like the NIAAA that also, besides giving us a lot of tools, helps us experience more joy in the journey.
Thanks, Rich. We'll give you the last say on enjoying the journey, Mike.
Well, Hutch, I'll say this, and your story was awesome. And again, you've helped me, helped all of us for a number of years because you're always so full of joy. So that's been inspiring in and of itself. And I would say one of the joys that I had was the first 15, 20 minutes of all of our calls. We'd all catch up on, how's it going and how are our families, and that collaboration was
we'd also, I'm going to interrupt, but we'd also all log in about 10, 15 minutes early because we couldn't wait to collaborate.
I like it.
Yeah, I mean, that to me gave us joy in the journey. And, there was joy with all of our families all supported us so much in this endeavor. And that gives you peace of mind when you're able to go into a project with that and knowing that you're being supported. So, and then I'd say the final thing is our heart, we want to give back. We want to be able to tell the next athletic administrator things that maybe we wish someone would have told us when we got started or when we got into the business. And so if this book can help the young athletic administrator or the veteran athletic administrator, then we'll consider that a success. And if you see the beginning of the book, going all the way back, we talked about the true definition of success. And it's through these stories that are shared, not so much the scoreboard, but through the transformational moments that have occurred across this country. And then, like Carol said earlier, outside the border. So with that, Hutch, we appreciate you having us on.
Well, let me finish with my standard question that you've all answered once, but you'll get to answer it again. And the question is to Carol, Mike, and Rich, what question should I have asked you that I failed to ask you? Now, you've heard that before, but that only applies to this book now. What question should I have asked you about the book that I failed to ask, or is there one? And so I'm going to have, Carol, go ahead and be first.
Question did you? Geez, I'm stumped.
Okay.
I'll answer why she's thinking.
Okay.
How is the book best utilized?
So go ahead and answer that.
And I try to think back if I was in a school, which I'm not anymore, but I think it's something I would purchase for myself, but I would also do a book study with my coaches and have an ongoing, whether that's a Google Doc or convening, sharing of what's been gained out of each of those chapters. I think it's also something that each executive director of each association, AD association, can look to get in the hands of their members, because each of those chapter titles has application for each person in their stewardship.
Well
That's
said.
what we do.
Mike?
Well, I'm just, one thing that we haven't really talked about is, when we came up with each lesson title were the quotes and the images that went along with that. And we spent a good deal of time, and it may not look like it, but we were very careful with each quote. And then we researched pretty significantly for those images that you see. Carol did such a great job of helping design throughout the book. And then the one question is, what chapter or what lesson did you leave out? Would be something that maybe could be asked, but for us, we feel like we covered everything that we set out to cover, 15, 16 months ago.
I would say, because I don't think there's a lot you let out. So we'll go back to you, Carol. Now you've had a chance to think about it. What questions should I have asked you that I failed to ask?
Well, the question would have been why, at the end of each chapter, you have lessons learned. Why did you do that? And, we had talked about that early on, and then we actually got so engrossed in doing so many other things with the book. We did finally come back to it and go through and highlight what we felt were 3 to 5 summary points of the chapter, just to give people an idea of, to be able to, pull it all together. And, when either executive directors or when athletic directors are buying this book for their coaching staffs, that's a good way for them to be able to determine, maybe where they want to start, because it's not just our thought about this. We've had a couple other people mention this, that, it's a book that you don't have to read from front to back. You can look at individual lessons and find a lesson that specifically deals with something that you may be dealing with as a coach, or you may be dealing with as an athletic director, and helping to better understand what might work for you. So, so it's a good resource. It's a great reference book. There's a lot of wonderful stories, but, yes, we encourage you to read it from front to back, but there is the opportunity to pick out some lessons. And that's one of the reasons why they are lessons and not chapters. And that's why they're lessons learned at the end.
Very good. And thank you for pointing that out, Carol. I didn't really think to mention that, but there are those 6 to 8 points at the end of each chapter. They just seem natural to me. And so I'm glad you pointed that out for our listeners who will be getting the book, that's out there. So with that wraps up this edition of the UIAAA Connection. Once again, our guests have been alphabetically Rich Barton, CMAA, Carol Dozibrin, CMAA, and Mike Ellson, CMAA, all of them executive directors. Rich, assistant executive director of the NIAAA, Carol and Mike in their states of New Hampshire and Tennessee. So thank you again, all of you, for being on the podcast.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us. This has been great.
Thank
For
you,
our
Mark.
listeners, for our listeners, I will put in another. It's not even a shameless plug. It's just a big plug, because this is as good as book as. If I could have this when I started as an AD back in 1983, my life would have been so much simpler. So for our listeners here in Utah and across the nation, and hopefully around the world, when you get a chance to purchase this for yourself and for your coaching staffs and for the faculty you work with, don't hesitate to do it, because it's well worth the investment. Listeners, we hope you tune in again next week for another edition of the UIAAA Connection.